America's map is full of lies, not intentional ones, just the kind that got repeated so many times they started sounding true. You've probably heard that Kansas is flat, that Texas is the biggest state, that the Mississippi River divides the country in half, and that Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world. Spoiler, none of those are quite right. In this video, we're uncovering 50 geography myths, misconceptions, and just plain wrong facts about the United States. The kind your teacher probably believed too. From mountains that aren't the tallest, to borders that make no sense, to states that technically don't exist the way you think they do. This is the real map of America, minus the lies. So grab a drink, settle in, and get ready to unlearn a few things you were absolutely sure about. And hey, if you enjoy this kind of journey through the weird side of geography, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment on which of these blew your mind the most. Now let's redraw America, myth by myth. Fact 50. Kansas isn't actually flat. Kansas has been slandered by road trip jokes for decades, but the data says otherwise. If you actually measure surface variation, Kansas ranks 7th in flatness, behind places like Florida and Illinois. The illusion comes from its subtle, consistent slope, rising gently westward for hundreds of miles. It's not flat. It's just evenly uphill, like a treadmill for your car. Scientists at least had fun with it. One 2003 study even compared the state's topography to a pancake, concluding that the pancake was technically flatter. So the next time someone calls Kansas boring, remind them it's just quietly aerodynamic. Fact 49. Texas isn't the biggest state. It's a painful truth for Texans. Alaska is more than twice their size. In fact, if you sliced Alaska in half, each piece would still outsize Texas. A comparison that feels personally targeted. Yet the myth survives because Texas simply feels bigger. Its highways are endless, its ego legendary, and its maps exaggerated by cartographers who clearly feared confrontation. But the numbers don't lie. Texas may rule the mainland, but Alaska owns the crown. An icy empire of glaciers, mountains, and land so vast you could lose an entire Texas inside it and still have room for another. Fact 48. Mount Everest isn't the tallest mountain on Earth. If we're talking altitude above sea level, Everest wins. But if we're talking true height, from base to peak, Hawaii's Mauna Kea quietly steals the title. Most of it hides underwater, rising more than 33,000 feet from the ocean floor. Everest looks dramatic because it sits on a pedestal of already tall mountains. Mauna Kea just prefers subtlety. Its summit even hosts world-class telescopes, letting it stare back at the stars it rivals in height. So yes, the world's tallest mountain is technically in the United States. It's just modest enough to spend half its life underwater. Fact 47. The Mississippi River doesn't split America evenly. We love to imagine the Mississippi as the neat divider between east and west, a natural border bisecting the nation. But the truth is messier. The river meanders like a bored snake, carving loops, oxbows, and shortcuts through the Midwest. Its midpoint doesn't line up with the country's population, geography, or even its hydrology. More people live east of it than west, and in places its floodplain sprawls wider than small states. The spine of America is less a straight line and more a restless wanderer, always shifting course, erasing maps, and refusing to stay symmetrical. Fact 46. The Four Corners isn't perfectly accurate. Standing with one foot in 4 states feels momentous, until you learn the monument is slightly misplaced. The 19th century surveyors who drew the lines didn't have GPS, just compasses and optimism. The real intersection sits a few hundred feet away, lost to desert scrub. When modern cartographers pointed this out, the states collectively shrugged and agreed to keep the marker where it is. After all, millions of tourists have already stood there declaring victory over geography. Technically, you were in 4 states close enough, which is really the most American way to define precision. Fact 45. There's a place where gravity feels weaker. In the Black Hills of South Dakota, there's a patch of land where balls roll uphill, people tilt sideways, and compasses lose their dignity. Locals call it the Cosmos Mystery Area. a roadside illusion where crooked trees, warped cabins, and tilted horizons trick your brain into mutiny. The secret isn't magnetism or supernatural forces, it's geometry and perspective conspiring against your senses. What feels like gravity gone rogue is really just slanted ground pretending to be level. Still, visitors walk away grinning, half convinced they just survived a glitch in the Matrix. Or at least in the landscaping. Fact 44. Florida isn't the southernmost state. That famous Key West buoy declaring southernmost point in the continental USA is a photo op built on technicalities. Hawaii stretches hundreds of miles farther south, meaning the true southernmost spot in the United States lies on a volcanic island in the Pacific, not a bar-lined street in Key West. Even within Florida, the actual geographic southern tip sits on Ballast Key, a private island closed to visitors, but tourists don't care. They just want the selfie. It's geography versus marketing, and marketing wins. After all, it's hard to sell t-shirts that say, "Almost the southernmost point." Fact 43. Mount Rushmore isn't finished. The iconic 4 presidents carved into South Dakota's granite were supposed to have torsos, inscriptions, and maybe even a grand staircase. But the Great Depression drained the budget, World War II shifted priorities, and the sculptor died before completion. What we see today, 4 heads emerging from stone, is just the rough draft that stuck. Behind Lincoln's ear lies an unfinished chamber meant to hold America's Hall of Records. Instead, it's a silent cavity filled with abandoned ambition. Mount Rushmore stands as both masterpiece and reminder. In America, even our monuments are works in progress. Fact 42. The Appalachian Mountains are older than dinosaurs. When you hike the Appalachians, you're walking on wrinkles older than the Atlantic Ocean. These mountains first rose when continents collided 500 million years ago, long before pterosaurs ever flapped a wing. They once rivaled the Himalayas in height, towering peaks that have since worn down into gentle ridges and fog-filled valleys. Every rounded summit is a fossilized memory of ancient tectonic drama. Today, they stretch quietly from Alabama to Canada, a green spine of nostalgia for an Earth that's reinvented itself several times since. The Appalachians don't brag about age, they just endure. Fact 41. The Great Lakes aren't all lakes. It's a cartographic lie hiding in plain sight. Lakes Michigan and Huron are actually one continuous body of water. They share the same surface level, connected by the Straits of Mackinac, a watery handshake between 2 different lakes. Early mapmakers named them separately for convenience, not science. Combined, they form the largest freshwater lake on Earth by surface area. So when someone says there are 5 Great Lakes, they're technically wrong. There are 4 great ones and 1 impressive identity crisis. Geography, it seems, occasionally needs a better editor. Fact 40. The US has a rainforest. You don't have to fly to the Amazon to find dripping moss and trees the size of apartment buildings. You just need to drive to Western Washington. The Hoh Rainforest in Olympic National Park receives nearly 14 feet of rain a year, turning everything green, soft, and slightly otherworldly. Ferns grow from tree trunks, moss carpets every surface, and fog moves like slow-motion smoke through the valleys. It's one of the few temperate rainforests left on Earth, and it feels prehistoric, like a place where dinosaurs should still be grazing. Bring a raincoat, not an umbrella. Umbrellas lose. Fact 39. There's a place where water flows uphill. Along certain rural roads in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and a dozen other gravity hills. Cars roll uphill. Rivers seem to climb, and tourists briefly question physics. The mystery, of course, isn't magnetism or witchcraft. It's just topographic trickery. Surrounding slopes and horizon lines confuse the brain's sense of level, flipping downhill into uphill in your mind. Even knowing the science doesn't ruin the fun. There's something oddly satisfying about defying gravity for 10 seconds before admitting you were simply fooled by perspective. In a world full of misinformation, it's nice when the lie at least entertains you. Fact 38. Maine isn't the easternmost state. On paper, Maine's cliffs catch the nation's first sunrise, but technically, Alaska gets the earlier light. Its far-flung Aleutian Islands cross the 180-degree meridian, which means part of Alaska actually sits in the eastern hemisphere, even farther east than Maine. It's one of geography's favorite loopholes. The state famous for midnight sun also owns tomorrow's sunrise. The international dateline had to bend around Alaska just to make sense of it. So while tourists gather in Acadia National Park to watch America's first dawn, Alaskans have already had breakfast. Time zones, it seems, have a sense of humor. Fact 37. The U.S. has a coral reef, and it's dying. Off the coast of the Florida Keys lies the Florida Reef Tract, the only living coral barrier reef in the continental United States. It stretches for 360 miles, teeming with parrotfish, sea turtles, and colors that look digitally enhanced. Unfortunately, rising ocean temperatures and pollution have turned that vibrancy into crisis. Entire sections are bleaching white, losing the algae that keep them alive. Scientists are now transplanting corals like heart surgeons, trying to save an ecosystem that protects Florida's coast and fuels its tourism. It's beautiful, tragic, and very Florida. Paradise forever on the brink of collapse. Fact 36. The highest temperature ever recorded wasn't in Arizona. Arizona's deserts love to brag about their heat, but the title of hottest spot on Earth belongs to Death Valley, California. On a July day in 1913, the thermometer hit 134 degrees, so hot that asphalt could soften and car tires hiss. The valley's below sea level basin traps heat like a magnifying glass over an anthill, turning summer into a survival challenge. Yet life persists. Lizards, wildflowers, and humans with selfie sticks. The place called Death Valley somehow teems with life. It's just a kind that doesn't expect comfort or shade. Fact 35. The US-Canada border isn't straight. Look at a map and it seems like a perfect line of latitude, 49 degrees north. Neat, orderly, logical. On the ground, it's anything but. The border zigzags through forests, lakes, and forgotten meadows. Surveyors in the 1800s battled weather, bad instruments, and worse mosquitoes, leaving behind a patchwork of small errors that became permanent. There are even pockets of no man's land, tiny triangles of territory belonging to nobody in particular. For the longest unguarded border in the world, it's impressively chaotic, proof that even straight lines can have commitment issues. Fact 34. The Great Plains aren't all plains. Despite the name, the Great Plains aren't one endless tabletop. They're a mosaic of rolling hills, eroded canyons, and strange geological leftovers, like a place where the land looks flat from a distance but never actually is. South Dakota's Badlands slice through the monotony with jagged cliffs that glow pink at sunset, and parts of Kansas hide canyons deeper than you'd expect from a state known for corn. The plains are more about mood than shape, a sense of open sky and distant horizons. Flatness is just the marketing department's version of simplicity. Fact 33. Hawaii isn't made of one island. When people say Hawaii, they usually mean Oahu, Maui, or the Big Island. But the state actually includes 137 islands, reefs, and volcanic specks scattered across 1,500 miles of ocean. Most are uninhabited, some are underwater, and a few barely break the surface before vanishing again. Together, they form an archipelago still being built by volcanoes at one end, while the other slowly sinks back into the sea. Hawaii, in essence, is a factory for islands, constantly creating, eroding, and recycling itself. The map never stays still. It just breathes lava and salt air. Fact 32. You can walk from the Pacific to the Atlantic without ever leaving Florida. Florida's waterways form a bizarre, semi-connected highway of rivers, canals, and lagoons stretching from the Gulf of Mexico to the Atlantic Ocean. In theory, a determined traveler could kayak, wade, and occasionally drag a canoe across the state without touching dry land. It's part natural wonder, part plumbing system, a labyrinth built for flood control that accidentally became an adventure route. Of course, you'd have to navigate gators, mosquitoes, and the occasional no trespassing sign. But technically, it's possible. Only in Florida can you cross the continent and still end up slightly sunburned and confused. Fact 31. The tallest mountain in North America isn't Mount McKinley. That's because Mount McKinley doesn't exist, at least not by that name. In 2015, the federal government officially restored its original title, Denali, meaning the high one in the Athabascan language. Rising 2,310 feet above Alaska, Denali towers over the continent like a frozen wave. For generations, locals never stopped calling it by its true name. Only the maps needed updating. The mountain itself didn't care, while it just kept wearing its permanent coat of snow, indifferent to political debates. Denali reminds us that geography outlasts bureaucracy, and mountains don't answer to Congress. Fact 30. The U.S. has a desert made of snow. New Mexico's White Sands National Park looks like a blinding snowfield, until you realize it's 100 degrees and the snow crunching underfoot is gypsum crystal. Wind and water carved this sea of white dunes over thousands of years, forming the largest gypsum field on Earth. The sand stays cool to the touch even under the desert sun, creating a landscape that feels like a mirage. At sunset, the dunes glow pink and gold, and at night, the place turns into a silent lunar world. It's not snow, just geology pretending to be Christmas. Fact 29. There's a town where you can stand in 3 time zones. Welcome to the Utah, Arizona, New Mexico borderlands, where time is more suggestion than science. Thanks to the chaos of daylight-saving laws and tribal boundaries, you can literally cross a street and jump an hour forward, or back. On the Navajo Nation, time follows one set of rules. Just outside, it's another. In some spots, people live, work, and send kids to school in 3 different time zones. The sun may rise once, but your phone thinks it's late 3 times. It's proof that in the American Southwest, even time needs a GPS. Fact 28. Rhode Island isn't an island. For a state with island in the name, Rhode Island spends most of its time attached to the mainland. The confusion goes back to colonial times when explorers named nearby Aquanic Island Rhode Island and then somehow applied it to the entire colony. Today, the actual island still exists, home to Newport's mansions and salty air, but the rest of the state sits comfortably on solid ground. So yes, Rhode Island is neither an island nor particularly large. It's the geographic equivalent of calling your driveway Ocean Boulevard. But the name stuck because history rarely edits itself. Fact 27. Lake Tahoe isn't in California, at least not entirely. California and Nevada share Lake Tahoe like divorced parents with joint custody, and neither side wants to give it up. The state line runs directly through the water, meaning you can literally swim from California to Nevada in a single stroke. The difference? One side has strict conservation laws, the other has casinos. Beneath its postcard surface lies 1,645 feet of cold, clear water, deep enough to hide the Empire State Building. Tahoe is less a lake and more a perfectly chilled mirror between 2 states that still argue over visitation rights. Fact 26. The center of North America keeps moving. If you've ever stood proudly at the Center of North America monument in Rugby, North Dakota, I have bad news. The center moved. Advances in mapping technology keep shifting the continent's calculated midpoint southward, first to a cow pasture near South Dakota and then to Kansas. There's no official ruling, just different math and wounded pride. Rugby still claims the title anyway, complete with a stone obelisk and gift shop. The truth? The continent's shape isn't fixed, and the Earth's crust isn't either. The center of North America, it turns out, is mostly marketing with latitude. Fact 25. The Mississippi Delta isn't shrinking, it's disappearing. Every year, Louisiana loses roughly a football field of land every hour. The Mississippi River once built the delta with rich sediment, but now levees and dams trap that material upstream. Rising seas, sinking land, and coastal erosion are swallowing the marshes faster than they can rebuild. Entire fishing towns have vanished, and barrier islands have dissolved into open water. Scientists call it coastal retreat. Locals just call it heartbreaking. It's one of the fastest land losses on Earth, proof that even mighty rivers can't outbuild the consequences of human engineering. Fact 24. The Rockies aren't America's longest mountain range. They may be the flashiest, but the title for length goes to the Appalachians. These older, humbler mountains stretch from Alabama clear into Newfoundland, nearly 1,600 miles of ancient backbone. The Rockies are younger, taller, and definitely more photogenic, but the Appalachians are survivors, worn smooth by 500 million years of wind and time. If the Rockies are America's dramatic teenager, the Appalachians are the wise grandparent who's seen it all and prefers fog to attention. You can't ski them as easily, but you can certainly feel their age in the quiet of every forested ridge. Fact 23. The U.S. has a volcano that erupts every day. Kilauea on Hawaii's Big Island has been in some form of eruption almost continuously for decades. Instead of violent explosions, it oozes lava like glowing syrup, creating new land even as it destroys roads and forests. Locals watch from safe distances as molten rock meets ocean, sending plumes of steam into the sky. Scientists call it one of the most studied volcanoes on Earth. Hawaiians call it Pele's home, the domain of the fire goddess. Kilauea is a reminder that the United States isn't finished forming. Some places here are still under construction. Fact 22. You've probably mispronounced Arkansas. It's Arkansas, not Arkansas, and yes, there's a state law about it. In 1881, lawmakers declared the official pronunciation to honor the French spelling and the Quapaw people who lived there long before colonists arrived. The extra S is just history showing off. The irony? Kansans pronounce their state exactly as it's spelled. The two names share roots, yet centuries of stubborn pride split their identities. One soft and southern, the other sharp and midwestern. It's linguistic geography at its finest. Same letters, different accents, and just enough confusion to keep outsiders guessing. Fact 21. California isn't the sunniest state. Despite its golden reputation, California ranks behind Arizona, Nevada, and even New Mexico when it comes to actual sunshine hours. The problem isn't lack of light, it's fog. Along the coast, especially near San Francisco, marine fog rolls in like clockwork, turning mornings into misty gray. Meanwhile, Phoenix basks under relentless blue skies, soaking up 300 days of sunshine a year. California still gets credit for sunny vibes, but in reality, it's a mood more than a measurement. The Golden State may be bright, but the desert Southwest is where the sun actually works overtime. Fact 20. Alaska has the westernmost and easternmost points in the U.S. Alaska refuses to follow the rules. Its Aleutian Islands stretch so far across the Pacific that they cross the 180-degree meridian, meaning part of Alaska technically sits in the eastern hemisphere. That makes it both the westernmost and easternmost state in America, depending on how you look at it. It's geography's favorite paradox. The international dateline even bends around the island, so Alaskans don't accidentally skip days. So while the rest of the country worries about time zones, Alaska just shrugs, existing simultaneously at the edge of yesterday and the beginning of tomorrow. Fact 19. There's a river that flows underground for miles. In southern Indiana, the Lost River disappears into a limestone cave and vanishes from sight for over 20 miles before resurfacing downstream. For centuries, locals thought it simply stopped existing, until geologists traced its route through a hidden network of caverns. The water carved its own secret highway beneath farm fields and small towns, proving rivers don't always follow our surface logic. On maps, it still looks like a broken thread, a stream that refuses to be seen. The Lost River isn't lost at all. It's just shy, taking the scenic underground route to wherever it's going. Fact 18. America's oldest mountains are still rising. The Ozarks and Appalachians are supposed to be ancient and settled, worn down by eons of erosion. But beneath that calm exterior, the Earth is still pushing them up, ever so slightly. Tectonic uplift continues to nudge these old bones higher each year, even as rain and wind wear them away. The result is a geological stalemate between destruction and rebirth. You'd never notice standing on a misty ridge in Tennessee or a forest bluff in Arkansas, but the ground beneath your boots is quietly rewriting its elevation. Old age apparently doesn't mean giving up, at least for mountains. Fact 17. New Orleans isn't below sea level everywhere. Everyone loves to say New Orleans is underwater, but that's only partly true. Some of the city's neighborhoods, like the French Quarter and parts of Uptown, actually sit on natural ridges that rise above sea level. It's the low-lying suburbs and reclaimed wetlands that flood first when storms hit. Over the centuries, development pushed people into sinking ground, while the Mississippi's levees cut off the sediments that once replenished it. So yes, parts of New Orleans are below sea level, but others are safely dry. Proof that in this city, even elevation has attitude. Fact 16. The U.S. has sand dunes taller than skyscrapers. In southern Colorado, the Great Sand Dunes rise like frozen waves, some reaching 750 feet high. They were formed when ancient winds trapped desert sands against the base of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, creating the tallest dunes in North America. Hike to the top and you'll see snow-capped peaks in one direction and sunlit plains in the other. A mashup of ecosystems that shouldn't coexist but somehow do. The dunes sing when the wind moves just right, producing a low hum that sounds like the desert itself breathing. It's Earth's weirdest symphony, and it's free admission. Fact 15. Not all of Nevada is desert. Despite the casino billboards and tumbleweed cliches, a third of Nevada is covered in forest. Pine, spruce, and alpine meadows that look more like Colorado than Vegas. The Sierra Nevada spills lush greenery into the state's western edge, feeding Lake Tahoe and mountain valleys that bloom every spring. In winter, you can ski within sight of cactus country. Nevada is really two worlds stitched together: desert and snow, dust and granite, neon and nature. The only thing consistent about the Silver State is its unpredictability, which, fittingly, makes it a gambler's paradise both on and off the tables. Fact 14. The Continental Divide isn't one single line. On maps it looks neat, a single ridge dividing rivers that flow to opposite oceans. But in reality, the Continental Divide forks, loops, and duplicates itself like a tangled necklace. There are actually multiple divides across the Rockies, including the Great Basin Divide, where rivers don't reach any ocean at all. Water here just disappears into salt flats or evaporates in desert air. So when you see those highway signs proclaiming crossing the Continental Divide, you're probably crossing one of several. Nature didn't read the map, it just spilled the ink and called it geography. Fact 13. Lake Michigan has tides. They're not ocean tides. You won't see surfers timing their rides. But Lake Michigan does rise and fall in rhythmic pulses called seaches. These standing waves slosh across the lake during storms, sometimes shifting water levels by several feet. Sailors know to respect them. Docks can flood or dry out within hours. It's one of those facts that makes freshwater feel slightly alive, breathing in slow motion. The Great Lakes may lack salt, but they still act like inland seas. Moody, unpredictable, and always ready to remind you who's in charge. Fact 12. The U.S. has a glacier that moves faster than a human walk. In Alaska, the Hubbard Glacier occasionally surges forward at speeds of up to 100 feet a day. That might not sound fast, until you realize it's millions of tons of ice grinding forward like a frozen bulldozer. The glacier advances, retreats, then surges again, sometimes damming fjords and flooding entire valleys. From afar, it looks still and eternal, but up close it crackles, groans, and shifts with every passing hour. Hubbard proves that glaciers aren't static. They're slow-motion rivers, alive on geological timescales. You can almost hear the planet sighing as it rearranges itself. Fact 11. There's a town where the sun doesn't rise for 65 days. In Utqiagvik, Alaska, formerly known as Barrow, winter swallows the horizon for over 2 months. Around mid-November, the sun dips below the Arctic Circle and doesn't return until late January. It's not total darkness. A faint twilight glows at noon like an extended sunset that never finishes. Residents adapt with lamps, routines, and coffee strong enough to intimidate polar bears. When the sun finally reappears, the entire town celebrates like it's a local holiday. Because it is. For 65 days a year, night wins. And somehow, life keeps glowing anyway. Fact 10. Colorado isn't all mountains. Despite the postcards, about 1/3 of Colorado is flat prairie stretching east toward Kansas. endless grasslands, windmills, and skies so wide they look fake. The Rockies steal the spotlight, but this eastern expanse is where most of the state's farming happens. It's also where you'll find ghost towns, tumbleweeds, and sunsets that look like oil paintings on fire. The mountains may define Colorado's image, but the plains quietly feed it. Drive long enough out there, and you'll swear you're in Nebraska, until the distant Rockies rise again like a mirage reminding you you're still in the Centennial State. Fact 9. The Grand Canyon isn't the deepest canyon in the U.S. It's certainly the most famous, but Hell's Canyon, straddling the Idaho-Oregon border, dives nearly 8,000 feet deep, outpacing the Grand Canyon by a full half-mile. The difference? Hell's Canyon doesn't have a marketing team. It's remote, rugged, and almost inaccessible, carved by the Snake River into a maze of cliffs and wilderness. Fewer tourists, fewer railings, more actual hellishness. The Grand Canyon might be the crown jewel, but Hell's Canyon is the hidden blade. Deeper, darker, and perfectly content being the underdog in America's great geological beauty contest. Fact 8. You can't see the Great Wall of China from space, but you can see America's interstates. The idea that the Great Wall is visible from orbit is a myth, but NASA astronauts confirm you can spot the United States interstate highway system, an endless gray web stretching across the continent. It's humanity's biggest doodle etched into the planet in neat geometric patterns. At night, the system glows with headlights and city clusters, forming a living circuit board of civilization. It's both impressive and slightly terrifying. Proof that Americans didn't just explore their country, they paved it. From above, it's not the mountains or rivers that stand out. It's the asphalt. Fact 7. Washington, D.C. was almost in Virginia. When Congress established the capital in 1790, the District of Columbia originally spanned both sides of the Potomac River. But in 1847, Virginia reclaimed its portion, modern-day Arlington and Alexandria, because locals were unhappy with federal taxes and neglect. Overnight, the map shrank, and D.C. lost almost a third of its territory. Today, the Pentagon, Reagan National Airport, and countless federal offices sit on what was once the capital itself. The boundary stones still exist, marking the ghost of a bigger Washington. In other words, D.C. was gerrymandered before gerrymandering was cool. Fact 6. The Great Salt Lake isn't always great. Utah's Great Salt Lake has shrunk to less than a third of its historical size, turning vast shorelines into cracked salt flats and exposing toxic dust. The water's salinity has spiked so high that brine shrimp are struggling to survive, and migrating birds are losing one of their few feeding stops. It's an ecological disaster in slow motion, like watching a sea evaporate. The irony? The lake's size has always fluctuated. Great was never a guarantee, just a mood. If the trend continues, Salt Lake City might soon live up to its name a little too literally. Fact 5. The U.S. has a town where you can drive north into Canada and still be in the U.S. Point Roberts, Washington sits below Vancouver, cut off from the rest of the country by an old surveying quirk. The border follows the 49th parallel, slicing straight through the landscape, and leaving this little peninsula stranded. To reach the rest of the U.S. by car, residents must cross into Canada, drive 25 miles, and then re-enter America. It's technically an exclave, but practically a geopolitical inconvenience. The kids there literally need a passport to get to school. Point Roberts is proof that lines on maps are easy to draw and hard to live with. Fact 4. The center of the 48 states is in Kansas, but not really. There's a stone monument in Lebanon, Kansas, proudly marking the geographic center of the continental U.S. But depending on how you define center, it might not be there at all. Geographers can measure by area, population, or shape, and each method puts the point somewhere else entirely. There's even a separate population center currently in Missouri that keeps drifting west every census as Americans move. The truth is, the center of the U.S. isn't a dot. It's a moving target, like the country itself, always shifting, never quite where it used to be. Fact 3. The U.S. border with Canada is the longest in the world, and it's unguarded. Stretching over 5,500 miles, the US-Canada border is so vast that it passes through forests, islands, frozen lakes, and a few people's backyards. Instead of walls, it's marked by stone pillars, trimmed trees, and occasional signs politely reminding you which country you're in. It's the longest undefended border on Earth. A quiet partnership built on trust, treaties, and mutual disinterest in drama. Somewhere along its length, a moose has probably crossed it without noticing. The line is visible from the air as a neat forest clearing, a human idea carved into nature's indifference. Fact 2. The US has a lake older than the Ice Age. Mono Lake in California is so old it predates the last Ice Age. At least 760,000 years old, to be precise. It's salty, alkaline, and utterly alien, filled with strange limestone towers called tufa, and clouds of tiny brine shrimp that attract millions of birds. There's no outlet, so every drop of water that's ever flowed in has stayed, evaporating slowly and leaving behind minerals. It's part lake, part chemistry experiment, and entirely timeless. Standing on its shores feels like looking at Earth before humans. Or maybe after. Either way, it's hauntingly beautiful in its stubborn survival. Fact 1. Maps have been lying to you since childhood. The world map you grew up with and the Mercator projection is a well-intentioned distortion. It stretches regions near the poles and shrinks those near the equator, making Greenland look bigger than Africa when it's actually 14 times smaller. The US looks wider, Europe looks central, and the southern hemisphere gets shortchanged. It was designed for navigation, not truth, yet it shaped how generations imagined the planet. So if your sense of geography feels a little skewed, it's because it literally is. The map wasn't wrong on purpose. It was just designed to keep sailors from getting lost. So can you believe that Kansas, the eternal punchline of flatness, is technically bumpier than a pancake? Or that Alaska somehow manages to be both the westernmost and easternmost state in the country at the same time? That's the beauty of geography. It's full of little betrayals. The maps we memorized as kids were neat and colorful, but the real world is messy, tilted, and wonderfully inconsistent. Every line on the page hides a story, every fact has an asterisk, and every state has at least one secret it's quietly been keeping from the rest of us. If you made it this far, tell us in the comments, how many of these 50 did you already know? And which one completely rewired your brain? And if you enjoyed exploring the lies we've all been living with, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who still thinks Rhode Island is an island. Until next time, keep questioning the map, because the truth about geography is it's never exactly where you left it.